Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jay. It's Saturday, and this podcast normally comes out on Wednesday, so I've failed you again. I know excuses are the nails in the house of failure, but I had a very bad cold until recently, and I couldn't talk so good. So it took some time. But here we go. It's a new episode. Check it out. 2, 1, 2, 3.
There are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all, 'cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
Hello and welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about atrocious books. Except this time the book's not that bad, but some of it is kind of regrettable. Anyway, I'm here with a good buddy of mine who knows more about baseball than anybody else I think I know in the world, Tim Harrison. How you doing, Tim?
Pretty good.
Cool. So the book we're talking about today is Veeck, as in wreck. Before we get into it, though, I wanted to say I recommended this book actually as something we talked about based mostly on the tone of it, which I find pretty funny. But after doing a ton of research later on about Bill Veeck, it turns out he's a great guy, and it seems like he's done a lot. He was definitely on the front lines of integrating Major League Baseball in a lot of ways, like way ahead of his time when it came to that sort of politics and stuff. So I do want to say that, while we're talking about this book, I don't want people to think we're insulting the man himself, except for when we do. But I mean, I think you'd agree. I mean, he was pretty influential in a lot of ways as far as the integration of baseball. Yep. With Adobe siding and all that stuff. And
I got copious notes, as you can see here, about all the cool stuff he did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a silly book in a lot of ways, but this is a man with the pretty respectable legend. So in retrospect, I almost feel bad about making fun of his autobiography.
But there's so much to make fun of.
Yeah, except I don't. So anyway, before we get too deep into it, I wanted to let you know that you can always email us at idon'tevenownaTelevision@gmail.com or visit twitter.com/IDEOTVpod, or the same thing at Facebook. And there you can engage in all sorts of exciting discussions on social media and just chill with your friends on the internet. So, and just one more thing before we get into this. This is a sports-heavy episode, obviously. If you're the type of person who is not even remotely interested in sports, especially baseball, just skip this. I don't think you're going to like it. So there you go. Cool. So that being said, let's get into things here. Let's talk a little bit about the book. Tim, what are your impressions?
So, I mean, I feel like you addressed a lot of the stuff in the intro, that we both kind of went into this knowing the main story about Bill Veeck, which is that he batted a little person as a pinch hitter for one of his players, and he told him, if you take the bat off your shoulder, I'm going to be sitting on top of the stadium with a sniper rifle, and I will shoot you dead. So he walked in 4 pitches, and then they put in a pinch runner.
Yep, and that was it. I'd like to recommend that's a great way to follow up my intro about what an excellent and tolerant man Bill Veeck was. But yeah, that's the section of the book that really made me want to talk about it.
It's the thing he opens the book with.
Yeah, it's kind of his opening salvo of like, hey, look, I'm interesting, and it's this whole story of basically the exploitation of this poor little person who was like brought in as like a Barnum and Bailey sideshow act to that was the Indians, right, or the Browns?
No, it was the Browns.
Yeah, to a Browns game. And, had his life threatened and, got 5 minutes of fame and then was completely shooed off the stage entirely.
And what made it even sadder is that this guy... So Bill Veeck asked him, what do you know about baseball? And he says something to the effect of, well, I know there's a bat and a ball, and that's about it. And so he picked this guy who didn't know anything about baseball, and he gave him the uniform and the bat, and he's like, here's how you crouch in the batter's box. Don't swing. Don't ever swing. And so I guess anytime Bill Veeck left the room, he would start swinging, and I guess he got really into it. And that's when Bill Veeck threatened to shoot him if he moved.
But let's take a step back here. Although, I mean, he opens the book this way, you know, and so it's hard to remove this impression.
Yeah, I mean, in his defense, the reason he says that he opens the book this way is, he says, no matter what else I ever do in my life, this is the main thing that I'll be remembered for.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, granted, but it's not as if, I don't think that's the thing he's proudest of in his life.
No.
I don't think he picked that and go, if there's one thing people need to know about me, it's this.
I think it was more like, if there's one thing that people need to know about me, it's that my last name is pronounced Veeck and not Veeck.
I'll never read it that way in my head, and every time I say it out loud, it takes me like a quarter second too long because I gotta think about it.
For the longest time, I was like talking about this book as Veeck as in wreck, and then like wondering why the hell you would call the book that, and now it makes so much more sense.
There's actually a bit in the book where he goes for an appointment with somebody, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Bill Veeck. I'm here for an appointment." And they're like, "No, we got a Bill Veeck. We don't know who you are."
Well, it is weird. I mean, it's 2 E's. I mean, people who have downloaded the podcast will see the spelling. It's Veeck, which does not look like Veeck in any known language that I know of. But what I really, I think I wanted to talk about here actually is the tone of this book. A lot of celebrity autobiographies, and we've done a couple on the show, are very ghost written, and they have this very kind of, what would you say, sanitized, manufactured, yeah, production line feel. This book, it was obviously written by the man himself.
Yeah. And
in the tone of the man himself, which I like to characterize as early period Abe Simpson. There's not a passage in this book that can't be read in Grandpa Simpson's voice that wouldn't make it better. We kind of get off at the start of the after his his tale about exploiting a little person for profit. We kind of move into more of his history, which is kind of one of these situations that I always love, where someone was. This is a great place to use this metaphor too. Born on third base, thinks he hits a triple. Dude's dad was president of the Chicago Cubs, right? And so Veeck grew up in a ballpark, basically. I think he even describes himself as that. Yeah. And is very, very proud of this fact for many, many pages until he buys his first team, when all of a sudden this is this like hard scrabble from out of nowhere thing that just like happened, you know? And it's like been a hard fight for him and stuff. He never really acknowledges the fact that like he was kind of like involved in that world in a way that gave him, I hate to use the catch word here, but gave him a lot of privilege in that world that other people wouldn't have had, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of see both sides of that, in that, yeah, he grew up, in and around baseball, but he was never independently wealthy, and his dad lost a lot of money in the stock market crash.
That is true, actually, yeah. I forgot about that part.
And, basically, he was talking about when he started buying the Milwaukee Brewers, who are a minor league team at the time. He was saying he started with very little money. He was going on loans. It wasn't as if he was inheriting things.
That's true. But
at the same time, he had experience in that world, and he knew what to look for, and connections.
Like, even if I had, like, let's say it was back when you could buy a minor league ball club for a normal person's amount of money. Even if I had the money to buy a minor league ball club, I wouldn't know where the fuck to begin. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you do? Who do you go talk to? Like, like, do you call up the fucking president of minor league baseball and go, I'm interested in purchasing a
what do you have available at the moment?
Like, who's on the market? Like, I don't know. I found that kind of funny, and that, like, he does, like, kind of portray it as, like, this, like, Dickensian orphan, like, struggling up from,
he
like,
definitely
street sweeping to, like, suddenly owning the White Sox, and it's a little ridiculous.
Actually, speaking of family stuff, one thing I wanted to point out that weirded me out for the entire book, he always refers to his father as my daddy.
Yeah.
And it's creepy as hell, weird. And I don't really understand why, but it just it gives me the willies for some reason.
Because Homeboy was like in his 70s when he wrote this. And like, I understand, like, I mean, he grew up in Chicago? Okay, I don't understand anymore. Because I was going to say that's kind of a Southern thing, you know, my daddy, my pa, shit like that. But like,
Even pa sounds better to me. Something
yeah,
about daddy. Oh,
Daddy
I don't like
sounds
it.
kind of like what you expect like someone on My Super Sweet 16 to say a lot. Maybe Bill Veeck just really wanted Justin Timberlake to sing at his 16th birthday party.
Oh, man.
But anyway, yeah, so we kind of arrive from there. He purchases his first team, and from there, that's kind of when he starts getting into like his tradition of showmanship, I think is the way he would describe it.
Yeah, so actually before that he was, I forget the title, maybe vice president. He worked in some capacity for the Cubs after his father passed away, and he started doing some of the stuff there. But it wasn't until he owned his own club where he really started going crazy.
And I think, you know, before we get too far into this, we should say that Veeck is known for inventing things like the exploding scoreboard.
Yeah.
I believe also the disco record burning.
Disco demolition.
Yeah, disco demolition. So basically any stupid idea you can think of in baseball that has had a lot of publicity since is something that he did, but every time it worked and it got people in the seats. So I don't know.
But it was way more interesting and trolly than like modern promotions, because my favorite one he did at the Brewers was he was talking about they faked a drawing and rather than just give out a random, like the prize to a random person, he says, we looked for like the most dignified suit wearing dude we could find as he came in. And then we pretended to pull him out of a hat, and we gave him 10 live squab, and we wanted to see how he could possibly hold on to them. And we gave them to him in the first inning, so he'd lost most of them by the end, but at the end of the game, he had one in each hand and one gripped between his knees.
Okay, I would love to see somebody get away with this now, right? Like, imagine the outrage. I was just trying to think of what a squab was at first, and that's a poultry,
Yeah,
right?
it's a poultry.
Okay, yeah. At first, I was thinking it was something like a squid.
that would be even better.
It would.
He also gave some woman like 10,000 cupcakes.
That's
and so
awesome.
they shipped them all to her house, and they were just like lining every surface in the entirety of the home.
So basically, I think what we're kind of getting at here already is that this isn't so much a bad book. I mean, it is a bad book, but it's a great collection of stories from a weird grandpa. And that's why I love this. I mean, we'll get into this later. Like, I recommend this book.
Wholeheartedly.
Even though I think it's poorly written and full of exaggerations and probably
outright lies.
Outright lies, yeah.
When I was taking notes, I found a few of them.
But it's also like a lot like hanging out, you know, like after the holiday dinner, like with your grandpa, like
got a few beers. in him.
he's maybe drank a little too much, and he's telling you about all the great things he's accomplished, and like reading this book is like that for 240 something pages. So.
Oh no, it's much more. It's like nearly 400 pages.
Oh, okay, yeah. See, my Kindle's set up on percentage, you know, and I blazed through this, so I thought it was a lot shorter.
$3.98.
Yeah, $3.98. Wow, it's a fun read. I mean, mostly,
and I don't even mean like the offensive like fixation on little people, because it goes beyond Eddie Gadel, who was the one we talked about earlier. There's a number of times in the book where he's like, and I always had this idea to, you know, at one point he has a little person race in miniature go-karts around the outfield, and there's like 4 other times it pops up.
He's
and
really into it.
He's really into it, and I don't get it.
I mean, I understand that, like, what this was in the 40s, you know, and physical handicap was still the height of comedy at that point in time, but like, yeah, he seemed a little too into it, like almost to the point where you get this Game of Thrones kind of feeling from it.
God.
You know? Like there's a King Joffrey element.
But what I was going to say is even more so than those sections that are like troubling and offensive and upsetting. So he was writing this in 1962 when he had just sold the White Sox, who were the last team he owned. He writes basically up until the day of publication. I mean, there's very recent stuff in here. And as you get closer to modern time when he was writing it, he gets more and more in detail into like these totally inconsequential trades and like day-to-day minutia of like how he was financing buying things. So like I know at one point You can't see it, but I highlighted the shit out of this book. I got book flags. I stayed up till late last night reliving college.
Did research.
Yeah,
man.
I took my time. But what I was going to say is that there's a gap between 275 and 375 where I have no notes, I have no highlighting, and I have no book flags because it's just him gathering the money to buy the White Sox.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Holy God, this is it's too much.
Hitting flip through that section because it is. It gets
brutal.
Yeah, he gets inside baseball, but in a way that's way deeper than you want to get inside.
It's like
baseball.
if you read Moby Dick and there's the one chapter with the outdated whale biology.
Yes,
it's there in the book, but it doesn't contribute anything.
Yeah,
that's exactly how this was.
Yeah, you could skip this entire part. You still know about Bill Veeck. It doesn't really matter which savings and loan he went to get X amount of dollars from and yada yada. Anyway, so I think it's probably a good time for us to take a break. We will be back in a few minutes here to talk more about a book that I unfortunately didn't hate as much as I should for this podcast, but we got a few more things to nitpick. So yeah, for sure. So we'll be back in a few here. So stick around.
When the Giants come to town, it's bye-bye, baby. Every time the chips are down, it's bye-bye, baby. History's in the making at Candlestick Park. Cheer for the batter and light the spark. If you're a fan of Giants baseball, sing bye-bye, baby. If you want to be in first place, oh, bye-bye, baby. Listen to the broadcasts on KSFO. Turn up the volume.
All right, we're back on I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about books that are bad, but this book wasn't all that bad. I wanted it to be bad. I wanted it to be so much worse than it was.
I mean, if we want to do a redux, we can read Jose Canseco's book.
Yeah, we'll do that later. That's probably a good idea. Actually, I was thinking a lot about Brian Bosworth wrote an autobiography at age 21.
Man.
And it's just called The Boz. And I guess it's just a whole story of his rise to the top, except he was in his early 20s and it's before he completely descended into fucking cocaine addiction and then complete obscurity. And that's what I've been wanting to talk about a lot. I'm really into sports biographies, and I think there's a lot to talk about on this show, but I have to kind of space
it's a rich
them out.
vein.
I have to space them out though, because I understand that podcast fans and sports fans are a Venn diagram with a very small interlap. So you do what you can. But anyway, I'm here once again this week with Tim Harrison.
Yep.
And we are discussing Veeck as in Wreck, the autobiography of Bill Veeck, who owned many teams, most famously the Chicago White Sox. As I was going to point out, he bought the team earlier, as you said, from the Kaminsky's. And one of the things that I think is remarkable is that Kaminsky Park never became Veeck Park.
Well, I mean, one of the things he said specifically with regards to buying the Cleveland Indians was he always endeavored to maintain some semblance of tradition and continuity, because he was talking about Lou Boudreau, who was the player manager who he didn't like and wanted to sell. And he didn't get rid of him right away because he's like, I just bought this team. I need to not make any big waves and keep people coming and keep people on my side. So I could see how changing the name from something that's been there from 1902.
Yeah, it is true. It's that one thing that comes across to this book is that Veeck has a huge ego, but he also has a huge respect for tradition, baseball tradition, and
also an insatiable appetite for money.
Yeah,
and he knew that would lose him money. I think
that may have something to do with it. So we're gonna do a little segment here called "What Is Your Fave?"
What is your fave? What is your fave? When you're presented with a list of options, what is your fave?
In What Is Your Fave? There's a list of many things. You pick your favorites. We're going to start here with the guest, Tim. And in this case, I would like to know what your favorite crazy promotional tactic is.
So, I mean, oh man, there's so many to talk about. And I think my favorite was actually probably the thing with the squab. that I talked about earlier, but my other favorite is it was actually a few days after the thing with Eddie Gadel,
The little
person.
Yeah.
He had, so it was the Philadelphia Athletics that were still owned by Connie Mack at the time, who had owned them since the early 1900s. He's the longest tenured baseball owner and manager in the history of the game.
I was gonna say that name should be familiar to like anybody who's even remotely familiar with baseball.
Yeah, and it was great. He was a fascinating guy and really like a rigid, old-fashioned guy. He wore like an old straw boater and like a high collar suit every day, regardless of the heat when he was managing. But anyway, so this was in 51, I think, with the Browns, and he was in town, and he got Connie Mack to go along with this promotion they called the Grandstand Manager promotion. So they had a couple thousand people sitting behind the home team dugout, and they took their manager out of the game completely. And they gave everyone in the section a placard that said yes in green on one side and no in red on the other. Mm-hmm. And for every situation in the game, there was a guy standing on the dugout who would hold up a sign that said, bunt, hit, whatever. And they would just flash the cards. And they had an actuary who would sit there and tally up the votes, like in their entirety. It wasn't like a spot check.
Okay. Just a quick interruption here.
Yeah.
I love baseball, right? And you love baseball. But I know one of the complaints about baseball is that it's a very slow-moving game.
They
Right.
finished in under 2 hours.
Okay.
What
wow.
up?
All right. Snap. You win.
That was actually one of the complaints at the time, too. But anyway,
And
so...
you knew where I was going right
Yeah.
away, and you got there before me.
Boom.
With the fucking finisher. So, you just won the Intercontinental Championship, my friend. So, anyway.
Yeah, so they did this promotion, and they ended up winning the game by, 5 runs, and they started, a super unconventional lineup and still won. And that's just, I'd be so stoked if I went to a Giants game and I got to, decide what to do. Because I love Bochy, but he makes some stupid calls sometimes that I'm sitting at home drinking a beer thinking, I could do better.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Bochy, manager of the San Francisco Giants Baseball Club.
So that was my favorite promotion, I think.
Okay, I think mine was Disco Demolition Night, mostly because of the vague undertones of racism. It's not explicitly mentioned in this book, but at the time, the Disco Sucks movement was raging. And a lot of that actually was rooted in homophobia and racism, in that people who were into rock felt threatened by this music that was being created by gay people and minorities and, appealed to, that same demographic. And it fucking wasn't rock. Bob Seger wasn't down with it. So they decided they'd have a night where they bring in a bunch of everyone would get in free, I believe, right? Or
maybe.
It was something like that. If you brought in a disco record, and then it was either before the game or during the seventh inning.
It was between a doubleheader.
Between a doubleheader, yeah. They brought in a bulldozer or something. And
no, they fucking put them all in a box and blew them up.
that was it, yeah. They put them in a box and exploded them. And that was the promotion for the baseball game. Fuck disco.
But people got so wound up on that, they charged the field, and they had to cancel the second game.
Oh,
and the White Sox ended up forfeiting.
I remember, yeah. Somehow I completely forgot to mention that part of the story, but yeah, it basically caused a riot. And so I think that was my favorite promotion. Knowing Veeck's past, I don't think that it was coming from a racist place from him. I'm sure that he was just he had tapped the vein of society and realized that people didn't like disco and hey, fuck disco, let's do this. But unfortunately, what it turned into was a race riot. Yeah, so there were some problems there.
If I remember correctly, there was a rock DJ on the radio in the city who had been leading a campaign against disco or whatever, and that's why
death to disco,
something
death
like that.
Before disco.
I don't know. See, that actually happened after he wrote the book, so it wasn't in there.
Yeah.
It was in the epilogue.
But I don't know. That's a very strange period in American history for sure. Because I like disco. Disco's fine. I like rock, You know, that shit's okay. I can't imagine hating either of them enough to want to, like, blow up a box full of records with TNT. Especially fucking disco is so innocuous, you know, like, who hates Donna Summers or Kano enough to want to explode them, you know? But, okay, so anyway, since we kind of touched on the dark side here, pardon me, whew, speaking of the dark side, I'd like to let you know that throughout this podcast, we've been drinking Deschutes freshly squeezed, what's it called?
IPA. Fresh squeezed IPA.
Fresh squeezed IPA. And so in my inevitable quest for an alcohol sponsorship, I'd like to say this is a great IPA, fully balanced, with kind of a resiny forward hop taste without being exceedingly bitter. And it also gets you drunk enough to talk about a book about Bill Veeck for a while. So, Deschutes, check it out. I wanted to kind of use some of this segment, actually, although this is a bad book podcast. Bill Veeck, in a lot of ways, was a pioneer of integration in baseball. And even though we just kind of, talked about the disco bigotry and stuff like that.
Disco bigotry is a great phrase,
yeah,
by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'll name a song then at some point. Disco bigotry. But Veeck, in a lot of ways, was a pioneer when it came to integration. And he was a guy who was fighting for kind of the assimilation of the Negro Leagues into the majors long before anyone else was. He was one of the guys kind of on the front line of being like, hey, let's let black players play in the major leagues. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because that's part of his legacy too. It's definitely not something you hear about as much as his fucking crazy midget pitcher or batter. But I think that this is pretty interesting, especially the Larry Doby situation. So I don't know if you want to get into that at all.
Yeah, sure. So Larry Doby was an outfielder who he was a longtime Negro League player who got called up to Bill Veeck's Indians in July of 1947, maybe 2 weeks after Jackie Robinson, like shortly thereafter, same month.
Yeah, same time.
So he was the second black player. He was the first in the American League. The most repeated story about this is when he introduced Larry Doby to the team. He went down the line, introduced him to every player, and, they shook hands. And there were 3 players who wouldn't shake hands with Larry Doby, and he almost immediately traded them away. Yeah. And he did everything in his power to make sure that even if, he can't control the outside world around his club and the people interacting with Doby on the street or from the stands, but he did a really, really good job about making sure that his team around Larry Doby was accommodating and positive
and wanted to hang with him and shit and thought he was a human being.
Yeah.
And I think like that's pretty fucking awesome because this is the same time, like you said, this is weeks after Robinson.
Well, there was that, and there was also the thing about spring training in Florida when the whole team was going to a restaurant.
Yes.
And they tried to bring Larry Doby and they weren't allowed in. And so Bill Veeck, I believe he talked to the mayor and said, hey, if you don't let my player eat in the restaurant with us, I'm going to move the team spring training to Florida next year. Yeah. Or to Arizona next year. Yeah. And he did.
That's a power play, like straight up and down. Like that's a power play to be like, hey, we're going to move the team.
Yeah. I believe the mayor relented and like let Larry Doby in and they still moved the team anyway. But, kind of along the same lines, one of the next players that Bill Veeck picked up was Satchel Paige, who is still the oldest rookie who ever played in the major leagues, and always will be.
If I can say so, my favorite baseball player of all time. So, yeah.
And so he started on the Indians when he was 42 at the youngest.
Yeah.
Possibly older because his birthday is in question.
And this was after a long career with the Kansas City Monarchs.
Yeah, and he pitched, his record that year was 6-1 with I believe a 2.48 ERA and 2 shutouts and 43 strikeouts. Holy shit.
Holy shit.
Holy shit.
You can hold that up against aces right now. And there are dudes who are getting paid fucking like $50 million a year that are not throwing that shit. So anyway, like I said, we were gonna get deep into baseball, but no, there are dudes making millions that are not throwing that, and they're like in their 20s, and Satchel Paige comes in at 42 and just burns the shit out of the league.
I have many of those said players on my shitty fantasy team. Well, and a really cool story about how he got him on the team. So his manager at the time, Lou Boudreau, I think, I always forget the last name, who was a player manager, said, like, no way, Satchel Paige is ancient. I know he was good at one point, but this is clearly just a promotional stunt. I'm not going to take him. And so Bill Veeck said, like, the next week, like, hey, I got this rookie I want you to come check out. I want you to come check out this rookie and see if he's up to snuff and see if you'll take him. And so because he was still he was a player manager, the way he tested rookie pitchers was to bat against them.
Yeah.
And so he gets to the ballpark, and there's fucking Satchel Paige out on the mound.
42
years old. And he's like...
It is crazy, like fucking baggy pants and shit.
Yeah. And so, Bill Veeck calms him down. He's like, just take 20 pitches, see what you think. If you don't like him, fine. And he took 20 swings, and I believe like 15 of them were strikes, like swinging strikes, and then the rest were like easy pop-ups.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, all right, we'll take him.
Well, that's because Satchel was the fucking man. I think it's probably a good time for us to go into a break because we're running pretty long here. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a little bit of a song here, and then we're going to come back and talk about Bill Veeck and the Philadelphia Phillies. So stick around.
Baseball. Love is just like baseball. All it is baseball. Love is just like baseball. You have played with me like a...
All right, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about books that are mostly awful. This one's awfully written, but awfully written by a pretty cool dude. So today I'm here with Tim Harrison.
Yo.
And we are discussing Veeck as in Wreck, which is the autobiography of Bill Veeck, a storied and legendary owner of several professional baseball clubs. So before we get any more into picking this apart, I think kind of in the tradition of our last segment, I'd like to kind of give things over here to Tim for a second because there were a couple more innovative things that Veeck did that are worthy of talking about without mocking. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to go ahead and discuss those things.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief, and then we'll go back to making fun of him.
Okay, good.
But what I was going to say at the end of the last segment was that he was actually looking to buy the Philadelphia Phillies in the early 40s. And he planned to stock the team almost exclusively with Negro League players. And the only reason this didn't end up happening was that he gave Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was the commissioner of baseball at the time, a heads up beforehand, and thinking that Landis couldn't kill it because black soldiers were serving in integrated units in World War II.
Which is, I mean, that's great logic, right?
It's a good line of reasoning, but he underestimated how much of a racist asshole Kennesaw Mountain Landis was. And Landis killed the deal.
If I could interrupt here, too, I'd like to say that Kennesaw Mountain Landis is one of the best names ever.
It's
for one
really
of the worst,
solid.
For one of the worst people who has ever existed.
It's really solid.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, we could have had integrated baseball during the war much earlier with a larger group of black players that would have been really cool.
Yeah, this was pre-Jackie Robinson. Mm-hmm. I mean, like we said again, Veeck was working really hard to integrate baseball, and unfortunately, old Rocky Mountain Landis there was not feeling it. And it took until many years later when John Denver recorded his song. All right, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so I won't go into any details about the others, but there were a bunch of other ideas that Bill Veeck had that didn't end up getting put into place while he was around, but happened much later that are basically hallmarks of baseball at this point. So interleague play was something he'd suggested as early as the 30s, which didn't happen until 1997.
I still hate it.
Oh, fuck you. It's so good.
No.
You get to watch American League pitchers hit. It's the funniest shit you've ever seen. Every
That
at-bat
is
is like
true.
Santiago Casilla.
That is true.
Oh, it's so good.
American League pitchers hitting is like watching like I don't know, like T-ball. It's great.
Oh, it's wonderful. But so there's that. There was, he proposed an unrestricted draft, which didn't happen until later, among many other contributions. So suffice to say, he was a really, really innovative owner who is mainly remembered for mocking little people, and it's really heartbreaking.
It is. Since we probably already alienated everyone except for baseball fans, I'd just like to go back to how much I hate interleague play as part of the regular season, because now you could have the same lineup as part of the regular season as the World Series, and that's lame as shit. I don't know, man.
It's more pitchers hitting, man.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I hate it, man. Like, it gets me depressed. Like, if the World Series rolls around and I've already seen those teams play each other, that's not right. That's not baseball.
Yeah.
That's some garbage.
It's still great.
Okay. All right, so anyway.
We should mock him some more.
Yeah.
This great man who
Yeah.
I just finished extolling the virtues of.
I mean, we say a great man, but you got to realize, like, even just reading this, you can realize, like, a ton of his motivations had to do with money.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, he was huge into integrating baseball, and I'm sure a lot of that came from, like, a very well-meaning place, but a lot of it came from a place of, like, holy shit, this is a huge gimmick that'll make me a ton of money, and that's kind of fucked up, so,
Yeah.
But in the long run, I feel like Bill Veeck is a dude I would love to like drink a couple old fashions with and just listen to him lie. Because
Yes.
this book contains several complete, absolute fabrications that never happened. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Never happened ever. So like one of the ones, the first one that I found that really made me like hunt for them for the rest of the book is he's talking about when he owned the Brewers, that there was no rule against him having a screen in right field to make it harder for left-handed batters to hit home runs. And then he realized, well, if there's no rule against this, there's also no rule against me retracting it when my team is at bat and extending it when the other team is at bat, making it infinitely harder for them to hit home runs. And I was reading that thinking, this sounds really cool, but also like a huge load of bullshit.
yeah.
It's totally a huge load of bullshit. Like a bunch of people tried to research this and found no evidence that this ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the retractable roof type shit. Like unless he had a team of little people who were carrying the screen up and down the aisles, which I would not put it past him. He
Nope.
loves them.
God, his weird fixation with little people is just totally perplexing to me. Because he mentions like 4 or 5 times throughout the book. Well, this was another thing I thought about using little people for. It's like, oh, man.
He loves them.
Ugh.
All right, but yeah. I mean, some more outright fabrications.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure there's more than one.
I mean, there's plenty. That and the other fabrication that I found was he was talking about his partner, whose name I'm totally blanking on, who was with him for...
Oh, that would be Joey Baseball.
Joey Baseball. So Joey Baseball was his partner through a lot of these teams, and he had a heart attack or stroke or some kind of malady that no one was ever really able to diagnose shortly before, I think when this was still with the Indians, shortly before the Indians were going to win a pennant. And he talks about Joey Baseball, getting better and wandering around the house and listening to the radio as the Indians win the pennant and then dying. And if you look up the dude's obituary, it's went into a coma after a stroke and never woke up. It's an outright total lie.
Oh, man. Sounds so good in a book, though.
Oh, yes, it does. It was very moving at the time.
I think it's even better with the name Joey Baseball.
Oh, speaking of names, this is totally inconsequential to the story, but I want to point out He had a Latin teacher named Annie Euripides Goodchild.
That's good.
Which is the dopest fucking name I've ever heard.
Euripides Goodchild, I believe, is another good name for a song.
It is.
You'll notice that I don't say that's a good name for your band, because that's just like an old dude joke when they're like, oh yeah, that would be a good name for a band, but no one would ever name a band that, so fuck that. But yeah, so speaking of old dude shit, we've been talking about baseball now for almost an hour. So
Oh, Christ.
it's probably a good time now to sign off. Tim, is there anything you'd like to plug before we head on out of here?
I mean, I don't do a whole lot of creative stuff. You can follow me at @DoHimJob on Twitter. I talk a lot about baseball and other sports you probably don't care about. But I make jokes sometimes.
This is true, though. If you follow him on Twitter, you should also follow my personal account, which is Code Switching, KODE Switching. Because whenever there's a Giants game on, we yell at each other a lot about baseball. So
It must
pretty
be
entertaining.
insufferable.
Yeah, it totally is. That's why I keep this separate from the official show podcast. But if you love baseball, follow Sam, follow me. We love baseball. So, all right. Well, even if you don't like baseball, but you do like podcasts, you should go ahead and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/IDEOTVpod, or on Twitter at the same abbreviation. If you'd like to communicate with me in a more private arena, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that would be idon'tevenowntelevision@gmail.com. So once again, I'd like to thank Tim for coming out here tonight.
Great to be here.
And I'd like to thank you for sticking around. So please continue to listen. And until then, keep reading crap.
What